For 8 years, the boy touched his ear. Every physician said the same thing. Nothing we can do. His father spent millions, flew across continents, begged specialists to examine again. They all shrugged. Then a janitor noticed something no one else did, and what he found inside that child's ear will leave you breathless. Raymond Roberts was a billionaire. Private jets, estates, more wealth than most people see in 10 lifetimes. But his son Daniel was born deaf. 8 years old, never heard a sound. Raymond tried everything. Mayo Clinic, Geneva, Beijing. Specialists who charged thousands per hour. They ran tests, scans, procedures. All of them said the same thing. Irreversible. Accept it. But Raymond couldn't accept it because Daniel was all he had left. His wife died giving birth to that boy. So Raymond kept searching, kept spending, kept begging God for an answer. What he didn't know, the answer wasn't coming from a hospital. It was coming from the man he just hired to clean his floors. Morris Lyon was a janitor. 27. No degree, no credentials, just a man trying to pay his grandmother's nursing home bills. But he noticed something about Daniel that every specialist had missed. Something in his ear, something dark. And one evening while Raymond was away, he made a decision that would either save that boy's life or destroy his own. What happened next? I need you to see it for yourself. Before we continue, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I believe this story found you today for a reason. The Roberts mansion stretched across 40 acres of Massachusetts land. From the outside, it looked like a dream. Colonial columns, windows that sparkled in the sunlight, gardens trimmed to perfection. But inside, silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind that feels like rest. This silence was heavy, thick, like something had died and no one had buried it yet. Servants moved through the hallways without speaking. Their footsteps were soft, careful. They'd learned quickly. Mr. Roberts liked things quiet. No music played in that house, no television noise, no laughter bouncing off the walls, just silence. And somewhere in that silence, a father was drowning. Raymond Roberts sat in his study most evenings, staring at the family portrait above the fireplace. There she was, Catherine, his wife, her smile frozen in oil paint, her eyes still bright, still alive. Next to her, a younger version of himself, looking hopeful, looking whole, and between them, Daniel, 3 years old in the portrait. Before Raymond understood that his son would never hear his mother's name. Catherine died the day Daniel was born. Complications, the doctors called it. Too much bleeding, too little time. Raymond held her hand while the light left her eyes. She'd been trying to say something. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Just like their son. Raymond never forgave himself. If he'd chosen a different hospital, if he'd demanded better care, if he'd been paying closer attention, maybe she'd still be here. Maybe Daniel would be different. The guilt sat on his chest like a stone he couldn't lift. So he did the only thing he knew how to do. He spent money, millions of dollars, the best specialists on earth, flights across oceans, hotels that cost more per night than most people earned in a month. Every doctor said the same thing. Your son's deafness is congenital. There's nothing we can do. You need to accept this. Accept it. How could he accept that his boy would live in silence forever? How could he accept that Daniel would never hear his father say, "I'm sorry your mother isn't here"? So Raymond kept searching, kept writing checks, kept hoping that somewhere out there, someone had the answer. He didn't realize the answer wasn't coming from a specialist. It was coming from someone he'd never think to look at twice. Someone who was about to walk through his front door with nothing but faith in his heart and bills he couldn't pay. His name was Morris, and he was about to change everything. Morris Lyon arrived on a Tuesday morning in October. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that makes everything feel heavier than it should. He stood at the gate of the Roberts estate, clutching his bag with both hands, trying to steady his breathing. This was it, his last chance. Back in Boston, his grandmother was lying in a nursing home bed. The bills were piling up on Morris's kitchen table like a tower he couldn't stop from growing. 3 months behind. That's what the letter said. If he didn't pay, they'd transfer his grandmother to a state facility. The kind of place where people were forgotten, where no one held your hand, where you became a number instead of a name. Morris couldn't let that happen. His grandmother had raised him, took him in after his parents died in a car accident when Morris was 11, fed him when there was nothing in the fridge, prayed over him when life felt impossible. That woman deserved better than a cold room and strangers who didn't care. So Morris took this job janitor at a billionaire's mansion. He didn't care about the fancy address. Didn't care about the wealthy family. He just needed the paycheck. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, met him at the door. Stern face, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who noticed everything and forgave nothing. "You're Morris." "Yes, ma'am." "You'll clean. You'll stay quiet. You'll keep to yourself. Mr. Roberts doesn't like disruptions, especially around his son." Morris nodded. "I understand. Do you?" Because the last person didn't. He tried to get too friendly with the boy. Thought he could help. He was gone within a week. Morris swallowed. "I'm just here to work, ma'am." Mrs. Patterson studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Follow me." As they walked through the mansion, Morris kept his eyes down, but he couldn't help noticing things. The silence so thick it felt alive. The way the other servants moved without speaking, without smiling, the heaviness that hung in the air like fog that wouldn't lift. And then he saw him. A small boy sitting on the marble staircase arranging toy cars in a perfect line. He didn't look up, didn't acknowledge anyone. His shoulders were hunched, his movements careful, precise. But what caught Morris's attention was something else. The way he kept touching his right ear, just briefly, almost like a habit, and the tiny winces that crossed his face each time he did. Morris's chest tightened. He'd seen that look before. He didn't say anything, just kept walking. But his heart whispered something he couldn't ignore. Pay attention. Days passed. Morris cleaned floors, wiped windows, folded linens. He kept his head down like Mrs. Patterson told him, but he couldn't stop watching Daniel. Every morning, same routine. The boy would sit alone in the sunroom, surrounded by model airplanes and puzzle pieces. His world was small, contained, safe. No one bothered him there. The other servants avoided him, not out of cruelty, out of fear. Like his silence was something they might catch. Some whispered that the boy was cursed, that losing his mother at birth had taken his hearing with her. Superstition, that's what it was. But Morris saw something different. He saw a child who was desperately lonely. A boy who sat by windows and pressed his small hand against the glass, watching the world move without him. He saw the way he'd look at his father sometimes when Raymond walked past without stopping, and how his little shoulders would sink just a bit lower. He saw how he touched his ear over and over, wincing each time, and no one noticed. Or maybe they'd stopped noticing long ago. One afternoon, Morris was mopping the hallway near the sunroom when he saw Daniel struggling with a model airplane wing. His small fingers couldn't get the piece to fit. Frustration creased his face. He shouldn't interfere. Mrs. Patterson's warning echoed in his mind. But before he could stop himself, Morris knelt down and gently took the wing. He fitted it into place with a soft click. Daniel looked up at him. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then something happened. The tiniest smile, just a flicker at the corner of his mouth. Morris's heart cracked wide open. He smiled back, gave him a small wave. Daniel waved in return. That night, Morris lay in his bed thinking about that wave. Such a small thing, but it meant everything. The next morning, he left something on the stairs where Daniel always sat. A folded paper bird, simple, made from scrap paper he'd found in the kitchen. He didn't wait to see if he'd take it. But the following day, the bird was gone. In its place, a note. 2 words in shaky handwriting. "Thank you." Morris pressed that note to his chest and closed his eyes. He whispered into the quiet, "Lord, let me help this child. Show me how." He didn't know it yet, but God was already answering. And the answer would cost him everything he had. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Morris and Daniel developed their own language. Small things, secret things. He'd leave him candy wrapped in gold foil. Daniel would leave him drawings of airplanes. Morris learned his signs, not the formal ones his tutors taught, but the personal ones he'd made up himself. The way he tapped his chest twice meant he was happy. The way he pointed to the sky meant he was thinking about stars. The way he pressed both palms together meant he felt safe, and slowly he started using that last sign around him. Safe. Morris treasured that more than anything. But not everyone was pleased. One evening, Mrs. Patterson cornered him in the kitchen. "I've seen you with the boy." Morris's stomach dropped. "Ma'am, I don't." Mrs. Patterson's voice was sharp as glass. "I warned you. Mr. Roberts has rules. Staff doesn't get close to Daniel. I'm not trying to cause trouble. He's just lonely. That's not your concern." Mrs. Patterson stepped closer. "You're here to clean, not to mother that child, not to fix what can't be fixed." Morris bit his tongue. Fix what can't be fixed. That's what everyone said. Even here, even in this house where the boy lived, they'd all given up. "If Mr. Roberts finds out you've been interfering, you'll be gone. No references, no second chances." Mrs. Patterson's eyes were cold. "Think about that." She walked away, heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. That night, Morris sat on his bed, staring at the wall. He thought about his grandmother, the bills, the paycheck he desperately needed. He thought about Daniel, his lonely eyes, his pain. He thought about the dark thing he'd seen in his ear. Mrs. Patterson's words echoed in his mind. Fix what can't be fixed. But what if it could be fixed? What if everyone was wrong? Morris picked up his Bible and held it close. "Lord, I don't know what to do. I can't lose this job, but I can't ignore what I'm seeing." He waited in the silence. No answer came. Just the weight of a decision he wasn't ready to make. Outside his window, the moon hung low and heavy. Inside his heart, a war was beginning. Between what he needed to survive and what he knew was right. He didn't know it yet, but that war was about to end because the next morning everything would change. The next morning came cold and quiet. Morris was sweeping the hallway when he heard it. A soft thud, then nothing. He stopped, listened. Another sound, like a muffled cry. His heart jumped. He followed the sound to the garden door. And there was Daniel sitting on the stone bench, his small body hunched over, both hands pressed tight against his right ear. His face was twisted, tears streaming down his cheeks, but no sound came from his mouth. He was crying in complete silence. Morris dropped the broom and ran to him. He knelt in front of him, his hands shaking. "Daniel, Daniel, look at me." He opened his eyes. Red, wet, full of pain. Morris gently signed, "Your ear." Daniel nodded, more tears falling. Morris's chest felt like it was being crushed. "Can I look?" he signed carefully. "I'll be gentle. I promise." Daniel hesitated. Fear flickered across his face. But then he leaned forward. Trust. This child, who had been poked and prodded by doctors his whole life, trusted him. Morris swallowed hard. He tilted his head gently toward the morning light and looked. There it was, deep inside his ear canal. Something dark, dense, glistening like wet stone. His breath stopped. It was bigger than before, clearer. How had every doctor missed this? How had every scan overlooked it? Morris's mind raced back to Marcus, his cousin, the blockage that had kept him deaf for 6 years. The simple procedure that changed his life. His hands trembled. "Daniel," he signed slowly. "There's something in your ear. Something that shouldn't be there." His eyes went wide. "We need to tell your father," Morris signed. Panic exploded across his face. His hands moved fast, frantic. "No, no doctors, please. They hurt me, always hurt, never help." Morris's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. He understood. 8 years of specialists, 8 years of procedures, 8 years of pain with no relief. Daniel had learned that help meant suffering. He took his small hands in his, looked into his eyes. "I would never hurt you," he whispered. "Never." Daniel stared at him, and slowly his breathing calmed. But the fear didn't leave his eyes. Morris sat with him until the tears dried, until his hands stopped shaking. Then he walked back inside, his mind spinning. He knew what he'd seen. He knew what it meant. But what could he do? Tell Raymond? He'd call more specialists, the same ones who'd missed it for years. Do nothing. Watch this child suffer in silence. That night, Morris didn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his grandmother's voice echoing in his head. "God doesn't always send help in fancy packages, baby. Sometimes he sends it through folks with nothing but willing hands." Morris closed his eyes. His hands were willing. But was he brave enough to use them? 3 days passed. Morris couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely think. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it. That dark mass lodged deep, blocking everything. And Daniel's face, the pain, the silent tears. On the 3rd night, he sat on the edge of his bed, Bible open in his lap. But the words blurred. All he could see was Marcus, his cousin, deaf for 6 years, written off by every doctor, until someone finally looked. One procedure, one moment of attention, and his world exploded into sound. Morris's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He knew what he'd seen in Daniel's ear. He knew. But who was he? A janitor. No degree, no training, no right to touch that boy. If he was wrong, if he hurt him, he'd go to prison. If he was right, but Raymond found out he'd acted without permission, he'd lose everything. His job, his income, his grandmother's care. "Lord," he whispered, voice cracking. "What do you want from me?" Silence, just the ticking of the clock. He thought about his brother, Samuel, dead at 14. He'd been sick for months, complaining of pain, but they couldn't afford doctors, couldn't afford help. Morris watched him fade, watched him struggle to breathe, watched him try to speak words that wouldn't come. He died in his arms, silent, just like Daniel's world. He'd promised himself that day. Promised God never again. He'd never stand by while a child suffered. But this was different. This wasn't his brother. This was a billionaire's son. And he was nobody. Morris closed the Bible, stood up, walked to the window. The moon hung heavy outside, spilling silver light across the gardens. Somewhere in this mansion, a little boy was sleeping with pain in his ear and silence in his world. And he was the only one who'd noticed, the only one who'd seen. "God," he breathed. "I'm scared. I'm so scared. But if this is what you're asking." His voice trailed off. He thought of his grandmother's words. "The Lord doesn't call the equipped child. He equips the called." Morris wiped his eyes, made a decision. Tomorrow, if Daniel showed pain again, he would act. He would trust what God had shown him, even if it cost him everything. He climbed into bed, heart pounding. Sleep wouldn't come. But peace did. A strange, heavy peace, the kind that comes when you've decided to step off the cliff and trust that God will catch you. Tomorrow was coming, and with it, the moment that would change everything. The next evening came too quickly. Raymond was away on business. The house was quiet. Morris was folding linens in the hallway when he heard it. A thump. His heart stopped. He ran toward the sound. Daniel lay on the hallway floor, curled up, both hands pressed to his ear, face contorted in agony. Tears streamed down his cheeks. Silent tears. Morris dropped to his knees beside him. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." He cradled his head gently, tilting it toward the lamplight. The dark mass was clearly visible now, swollen, pressing against his ear canal. His hands trembled. This was it, the moment. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the sterilized tweezers he'd taken from the first aid kit 3 days ago, just in case. His breath came in short bursts. "Lord," he whispered, "guide my hands, please." Daniel looked up at him, eyes wide, scared, but trusting. "I won't hurt you," Morris signed with one hand. "I promise." He nodded slowly. Morris steadied himself, took a breath, and gently, carefully moved the tweezers into his ear canal. His hand shook. He could feel it, the dark mass, dense and sticky. He hooked it gently, pulled. Resistance. His heart hammered. He pulled again, slow, careful, and then release. Something slid free. It landed in his palm. Dark, wet, biological, years of buildup that had stolen his hearing. Morris stared at it. His stomach turned, but before he could react, Daniel gasped. A real gasp, audible, loud. His hand flew to his ear. His eyes went wide. Wider than Morris had ever seen them. He sat up suddenly, looking around the hallway like he'd never seen it before. Then he pointed at the grandfather clock on the wall. The one that had been ticking his whole life. The one he'd never heard. His mouth opened. A sound came out. Rough, broken, unpracticed, but real. "Tick," he whispered. Morris's tears fell. "Yes, baby. That's the clock. You can hear it." Daniel's whole body trembled. He touched his throat, felt the vibration of his own voice. His eyes filled with wonder and fear and something else. Hope. His mouth opened again. One word. The first real word he'd ever spoken. "Dad." Morris sobbed. He pulled him close, holding him as he shook as sounds flooded his world for the first time in 8 years. "You can hear," he whispered into his hair. "Thank you, Jesus. You can hear." Daniel clung to him. And then, footsteps heavy, fast, coming down the hallway. Morris looked up. Raymond Roberts stood in the doorway, face white as death, eyes locked on his son on the floor, and the blood on Morris's hands. "What have you done?" Raymond's voice shook the walls. He rushed forward, pushing Morris aside, grabbing Daniel by the shoulders. "What did he do to you?" Daniel flinched at the sound. So loud, so sharp. But then his mouth opened. "Dad, I can hear you." Raymond froze. His entire body went rigid. "What?" Daniel reached up and touched his father's face. "Your voice," he whispered. "Is that your voice?" Raymond's legs buckled. But before the moment could breathe, before he could understand what was happening, his eyes landed on Morris's hands. The blood, the tweezers, the dark mass sitting in his palm. Terror overtook wonder. "Security," he bellowed. "Now." 2 guards appeared instantly. "Get him away from my son." Morris's heart shattered. "Sir, please listen to me. I didn't hurt him. I helped him. Look." He held out his palm, showing him the blockage. This was inside his ear. This is why he couldn't hear. I removed it. You're not a doctor, Raymond roared. You could have killed him. The guards grabbed Morris's arms. Daniel screamed. Actually screamed. No, don't take him. The sound of his son's voice, loud, desperate, real, stopped Raymond cold. But the fear was too strong. Take him to the security office. Call the police. Morris didn't resist. As they dragged him away, he looked back at Daniel. It's okay, he mouthed. You're going to be okay. Daniel sobbed. Loud, messy sobs. The first sounds of grief he'd ever made. At the hospital, doctors swarmed around Daniel. Tests, scans, examinations. Raymond paced the hallway, his mind spinning. His son was speaking, hearing, responding to sounds. It was impossible. A nurse approached him. Mr. Roberts, the doctor needs to speak with you urgently. Raymond followed her into a small office. Dr. Matthews sat behind the desk, face grim. Mr. Roberts, I don't know how to say this. Just say it. The doctor slid a folder across the desk. This is your son's scan from 3 years ago. Raymond opened it. There, circled in red, was a notation. Dense obstruction noted in right ear canal. Recommend immediate removal. Raymond's blood turned to ice. Someone saw this? Dr. Matthews nodded slowly. It appears so, but there's no follow-up, no procedure scheduled. Your account was flagged for ongoing treatment protocol. The words hit Raymond like a bullet. Ongoing treatment protocol. They'd known. They'd seen the blockage and they'd left it there because his money was too good. Because his desperation was profitable. They kept my son deaf, Raymond whispered. On purpose. Dr. Matthews said nothing. But his silence said everything. Raymond's hands trembled. All those years, all those millions, all those specialists shaking their heads. They'd lied, and the one person who told the truth who'd actually helped was sitting in his security office waiting to be arrested. Raymond stood. Where are you going? The doctor asked. Raymond didn't answer. He had a janitor to find and a lifetime of apologies to make. Morris sat alone in the security office, hands folded, head bowed. He wasn't praying for himself. He was praying for Daniel, that his hearing would hold, that his father would understand, that the boy would finally know what it felt like to live in a world full of sound. The door opened. He looked up. Raymond Roberts stood there. But he wasn't the same man who dragged him away an hour ago. His eyes were red, his face broken. He looked like a man who just watched his whole world crumble and rebuild in the same breath. Morris. Her name spoken softly, almost reverently. He stood. Mr. Roberts, I can explain. Don't. He walked toward him slowly. Don't explain. Don't apologize. Don't say a word. He stopped in front of him. And this billionaire, this man who controlled empires, fell to his knees. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Morris's breath caught. The doctors knew, Raymond said, voice cracking. They saw the blockage years ago. They left it there because my money was too good to cure. Tears streamed down his face. I trusted them. I trusted credentials and degrees and expensive hospitals. I threw millions at my son's problem and never once stopped to actually look at him. He looked up at him. But you did. You saw him. You saw his pain. You paid attention when no one else bothered. Morris's own tears fell. I just loved him, sir. That's all. Raymond shook his head. No, that's everything. He stood slowly. I've spent 8 years trying to buy a miracle, and God sent one through the man I hired to clean my floors. Morris wiped his eyes. God uses the willing, Mr. Roberts. That's what my grandmother always said. Raymond nodded. She was right. They walked back to Daniel's hospital room together. The boy sat on the bed, headphones on, listening to music for the first time. His face was pure wonder. When he saw them, he pulled off the headphones and ran straight to Morris. He wrapped his arms around his waist. "Thank you," he said. His voice was rough, unpracticed, beautiful. Morris knelt down and held him tight. "You were always worth hearing, baby. Always." Daniel pulled back and looked at his father. "Dad, I can hear your heart. It's beating fast." Raymond dropped to his knees and pulled his son close. For the first time in 8 years, Daniel heard his father cry. And Morris, standing quietly beside them, finally let himself breathe. God had answered his prayer. Not with money, not with medicine, but with willing hands and a faithful heart. Sometimes that's all a miracle needs. 3 months later, the Roberts mansion looked different. The silence was gone, replaced by something warmer. Laughter echoed through the hallways. Music played softly in the sunroom. Daniel's voice, growing stronger every day, called out to his father from the gardens. Raymond had fired every doctor who'd failed his son. He'd donated millions to research programs for children with hearing difficulties. He'd made it his mission to ensure no other child would suffer the way Daniel had. But his greatest change was closer to home. Morris Lyon no longer cleaned floors. Raymond had insisted he stay, not as a janitor, but as Daniel's companion, his tutor, his guardian. The man who'd saved his son deserved more than a paycheck. He deserved a family. Morris's grandmother had been moved to the finest care facility in Massachusetts, her bills paid in full for the rest of her life. Raymond visited her once a week, bringing flowers, sitting with her, listening to her stories about the grandson who'd changed everything. One evening, as the sun set over the estate, Raymond found Morris and Daniel in the garden. They were building a model airplane together, Daniel chattering excitedly about wings and engines and flight. Raymond stood there watching, his heart full for the first time in 8 years. Morris looked up and saw him. "Mr. Roberts, come join us." Raymond shook his head. "Raymond. Please. Just Raymond." He sat down on the grass beside them. Daniel immediately climbed into his lap, still talking, still marveling at the sounds around him. "You know," Raymond said quietly to Morris, "I spent 8 years searching the world for someone to save my son. I never thought to look at the man right in front of me." Morris smiled. "God doesn't work the way we expect, Raymond. He works the way we need. He sent you." "He sent us to each other," Morris corrected. "You needed someone to see Daniel. I needed someone to show me that faith is stronger than fear. Daniel needed both of us." Raymond nodded, watching his son's face light up as a bird sang in the nearby tree. Every sound was still a miracle to him. Every voice, every whisper, every note of music. "What do you hear, son?" Raymond asked. Daniel closed his eyes, listening. "Everything, Dad. I hear everything." And in that moment, surrounded by the sounds of life, the three of them sat together. A father who'd learned that love couldn't be bought. A man who'd learned that courage came from faith. And a boy who'd learned that the world was full of wonder. The mansion was no longer silent. It was alive. And in its halls, a miracle walked, talked, laughed, and heard every precious sound. Morris looked up at the darkening sky and whispered a prayer of thanks. For willing hands. For faithful hearts. For second chances. For the God who sees every suffering child and sends help in the most unexpected ways. The Roberts family had been broken by silence. But they'd been healed by love. And sometimes, that's the greatest miracle of all. As the stars began to appear above them, Daniel's voice rang out clear and strong. "Look, Dad. Look, Morris. The stars are singing." They couldn't hear it, but they believed him. Because miracles, once you've witnessed one, teach you to believe in all the others waiting to unfold. And in a mansion in Massachusetts, 3 hearts beat as one, finally complete, finally whole, finally home.